friends, I'm really excited to film today's video. Thank you for watching. This video is going to be all about eyeshadow. And the reason for that is because most of the comments and questions that I've gotten on my previous videos have been about eyeshadow. People wanting to have more tips, more demos on how to do it, which is great for me. I'm excited for it because for quite a while now, I've had this idea of trying to give people a way to think about doing their eyeshadow that is very approachable and repeatable, meaning a simple concept of how to do it, and then it's repeatable in that you could then take that simple concept and create more eyeshadow combinations than you could ever possibly need in your life, right? So you can do very kind of soft neutral looks. You can do something that's with neutral colors but more dramatic, or you can do any sort of color combination that you want. You can get more colorful, you can combine colors and neutrals, you can get smoky with it, all using the same concept. So what I'm calling that concept is 3 and 3. 3 shadows, 3 brushes, and that'll get you there. Just between the two of us, you could really probably do it with 2 shadows and 2 brushes if you want. But the 3 and 3 is closer to what I do on a daily basis, so that's what I'm going to show you. If I can remember, I'll also point out for you the steps and the brushes that you could skip to make it 2 plus 2 if you wanted. So let's get right into it. I am in natural light today, so I wanted you to be able to see what this looks like in natural light. I'm not using my circle ring light to make myself brighter, and I'm really close up, as you've probably noticed, with, again, the idea of wanting you to be able to see as well as possible what I'm doing on my eyeshadow. So let's dive in. The first thing that is so important with eyeshadow is eye primer, and I'll tell you what, I resisted using eye primer for years because I just didn't want to buy another product. I didn't want to have to put on another product, and it just seemed like it really wasn't that necessary. But you know what? As it turns out, it does make a big difference. So what I have on my eyelids at this point in my makeup is foundation and some setting powder. And you know what, if you want to skip primer or you just don't have it and you don't want to wait to get started trying this eyeshadow method, then just make sure you have foundation and setting powder on your eyelids. It's better than nothing. You certainly would never want to go, like if you're a person who doesn't wear foundation, you still need to put something on your eyelids because you would never want to do eyeshadow just on your bare eyelids. It's just going to not last, all right? So if you're like most of the world and you can get kind of creasing in your eyeshadow, or you feel like your eyeshadow disappears throughout the day, you feel like it like changes colors, which I've had happen. It's like you put on a purple and then you look at yourself midday and it's turned kind of brown. All of those things are helped significantly by eye primer. They just are. So again, you'd never want to put it on a bare eye, but at a bare minimum, just at least have some foundation and powder, but ideally use an eye primer, just like I'm doing. This is a product that MAC makes, but there's lots of, you know, eye primers available. This one's by MAC. It's called a Paint Pot, and the shade that I'm using is Soft Ocre. It's very creamy and thick. It's kind of the consistency of a concealer that comes in a pot if you've ever used one of those. And it just is really a beautiful eye primer, and you want to put it on a very thin, even layer. And then I like to just go over it with my damp beauty sponge to just make sure it's completely even and smooth, because this is going to make the most of our eyeshadow. All right, so to really hammer home the point that you can use this concept that I'm talking about with different eye looks, I'm actually going to do my eyes 2 different ways today. And then I'm going to proceed to have weird eye looks throughout the rest of my day as I'm running errands. I don't know. I mean, actually, I'll clearly have to go in and redo one of my eyes. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to do probably my left eye with kind of browns and coppers, and then my right eye, I'm going to do pinks and plums. So you can see 2 different looks. And I've not practiced this, by the way, so wish me luck. All right, I'm going to start over here on my left eye. Your first shadow, so 3 shadows, 3 brushes. The first shadow and brush is going to be a medium to light toned shadow. Typically, you want this to be a matte shadow, meaning it's not shimmery and glittery. Although it doesn't have to be that. That just kind of makes your life easier if you use a matte shadow. But the more important piece is that it's a medium toned shadow on a fluffy brush. So let's look at this brush I'm going to use. Okay, it is fluffy. This one has a little bit of a point at the top, but you don't have to have, you don't want it to be completely squared off, but it doesn't have to be any specific shape other than fluffy and big. This brush, if you see how big it is relative to my eye, okay, everybody's eye shape and size is also different. So you don't want one that's like as big as your whole eyelid, and they make those. So you don't want that. You want it to be, you know, sizable and fluffy. That is very key, all right, the brush, number one. Shadow number one that I'm going to use for my browns and coppers look is this kind of medium tone brown. It's kind of a taupe. And by the way, I'm not really going to go into the products I'm using today, but in the description below this video, I'll list everything that I used. So if you see something you like, it'll be down there. Or you can post a question. I'd love to answer your questions about what products I used, etc. All right, so I'm going into great detail in this video because that's what people say they want. All right, so I went into that shadow and then I tapped it off. You always want to tap off your shadow just because they're powders and you will have extra on your brush, and that is either going to fall out on your cheeks or you can tap it off and it won't fall off on your cheeks. So that's why you tap. All right, so with this shadow, this is, like I said, I haven't really practiced this, so I hope that you can see what I'm doing really well. I think I'm going to have to look in the phone so you can see this eye. I'm just going to go back and forth in the kind of the socket or crease of my eye. They call this windshield wiper, and you can see why. I'm just going back and forth. That simple. And then on this outer corner, I'm going in a circle. Now, this shade is so kind of light and neutral that it's hard for you to even see the exact shape that I've created with this shadow on my lid. So it's very forgiving, right? I don't have to be real exacting with this, but I am doing a circle on this outer corner and then windshield wipering back and forth. Now, because this is a lighter shade, you can go in a little further on your eyelid. If I was doing this with a much darker shade, which I'm going to do next, you'll see, I would want to make sure not to come in too far. Think about your makeup, especially your eyeshadow, just like you would painting a picture. Anything that's dark is going to tend to look smaller and closer in because it's dark, right? Like think about painting a room, and you don't want your inner corner to be smaller and closer in, typically, right? We want it to look light and bright in our inner corner, since that's the smallest part of our eye. All right, so do you see what I did there? Back and forth, circles on the corner, and this brush being big and fluffy makes that color be light. It makes it be kind of a wash of color, and it makes you able to do this swirly motion and back and forth. If the brush was smaller and tighter, you're not going to be able to do that kind of swirly wash of color. Does that make sense? While I have that same brush and that same shadow, I'm going to get a little more, tap it off, and I'm going to go up under. Now, going up under your lower lash line, of course, is completely optional. I think it looks really pretty. I think it can make your eyes look bigger. It can also make your eyes look smaller, depending on how you do it. But I think it just draws such focus and emphasis to the eye that I like it. But you can completely skip this under eye part if you don't. Just don't do it, okay? All right, that's one shadow, one brush. Got it? Now I'm going to switch to the other eye. Now this brush that I'm using is very, very similar, but you see they're not exactly the same, and that just speaks to the point. They don't have to be any specific exact shape. It just needs to be big and fluffy, but the ends of them are about the same size. So this is going to work. And on this eye, I'm going to do my pinks and purples. So for this shadow, I'm using this. It almost exactly matches my top. It's like a burgundy kind of plum color. It does have the tiniest bit of sparkle in it, but it's going to work. It'll be fine. So like I said, ideally you'd have something matte like this one. It's just the easiest, but this one's going to have a little bit of sparkle and it's going to work just fine. So I'm swirling it around, tapping it off, and I'm going to do the same thing. Because it's a big fluffy brush, again, think about painting a picture. The smaller and kind of tighter that brush is, the more intense the color it's going to deposit. So, I don't think I need to explain that more. That makes sense, right? So if I was using this tiny brush and I went into that same shadow, it would look even darker because it's going to be more intensely packed on those bristles. So again, that's why this brush selection, I'm going back and forth windshield wiper and circles on the edges. The brush selection is so key. But obviously this shadow is much more intense and pigmented than that one, even using a big fluffy brush. Make sense? All right, so again, windshield wiper, circles on the edge. As I mentioned earlier though, I'm not bringing this as far in because it's so dark. Does that make sense? Okay, that's step one. You with me so far? Hopefully so. And I know that this looks a little chunky and we're gonna fix that later. Don't worry about that. Okay. Second shadow we're going to do is going to typically be a darker shadow, and it could be another matte shade or it could be something with some shimmer or some glitter sparkly to it. So on my left eye with this brown palette, I'm going to do one of my very favorite shadows. This is a copper, and isn't that gorgeous? And it definitely has some shimmer in it. I absolutely love this shade. I use it all the time. On my right eye, to just preview what I'm going to do there, I'm going to be using also something with a shimmer. I love shimmers and metallics, so I wear them a lot. But you could absolutely do, like I said, a matte, another matte in this step. But this is like a rose gold. I'm going to do that on this eye. So you can see that's not really darker. You'll see when we get there. This is, again, it's going to be a good example of how it doesn't have to be exact. Just use the concepts and apply them over and over. So second step is second brush, second shadow. The second brush is smaller and tighter. Okay, so here was the first brush I used, and compare the size difference. Significant, right? So we're going to get really detailed with this brush, and look at the ends of them. Dramatically different. So that's what I'm going to use to go into my second shadow. Again, conceptually would be always something darker than what you put on. And I'm tapped it off, and I'm going to go the same motion. Windshield wiper, and I'm even placing it in the same place. But because the brush is smaller, it's going to, and I'm going, circles are a little harder to do with this brush, like I mentioned earlier, because it's small. So instead of circles, I'm kind of tapping and patting on that outer edge instead of doing the circles. Because the brush is smaller, it's naturally giving us that kind of gradient effect where I can still see the first shade that I applied behind this one. Sorry, that lighting. This is the pros and cons of natural light. Kind of comes and goes. All right, again, I'm tapping and patting instead of circles on the outside, but I'm doing the same motion in here. And again, I can see that we need to blend that. We're going to do that in just a minute. Okay, does that make sense? On the lower lash line, I'm going to do the same as I did with the first brush and color, but I'm going to only go about halfway across. And I'm going to pull it out far enough that it connects with that top shadow. Now, I would like for this to be a little more pointed, so you see what I'm doing? I'm literally drawing kind of a triangle there. All right, so I'm going to stop right there and let you look at that. In the comments down below, let me know what questions you have. Let me know what I'm not showing or explaining well enough. Here's where I'm going to stop and I'm going to blend. All right, so I'm back to my first brush, And I'm going to put back on there just like 1 ounce of that first shadow. I'm tapping it off and I'm going around the edges. And that's where I'm going to blend out that inner corner where it got a little harsh. Around the edges. Now, I'm not touching the insides of this. I'm not undoing any of that second darker shadow. I'm only touching the very edges, but we can still see the lighter shade. We can still see the second shade, right? Shade 1, shade 2. I'm only barely touching, and I'm only touching the outer edges. But that is starting to look blended and pretty and give you that gradient look of one shadow kind of melting into the next. That's what makes, I'm going to do the same thing down below, by the way. I'm just going to blend under a little bit. That's what makes your eyeshadow look, I don't know, that's what kind of gives your eyeshadow that wow effect where people will be like, wow, your eyeshadow is pretty. I think that's what it is this blended gradient effect and having a mixture of texture and color. So in this eye is a perfect example. We've got that mixture of a matte shade with a shimmery shade, and they're blending and melting in together. It just looks kind of professionally done, and that is the thing that makes your eyeshadow look like, wow, that's pretty. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I think that's a really pretty eye, right? Really pretty, really wearable, and easy to do. All right, so I have a little bit of fallout on my cheek, even though I do tap off. Sometimes you get a little, so I just very gently whisk that away, but that's something you want to look for as you're doing your eyeshadow. All right, now I'm going to do the same thing on my right eye with that rose gold. Again, similar brush. They're not exactly the same, but they're very similar. The endpoints are similarly sized, and they're similar in how tight they are in their bristles. So we're going to swirl into the rose gold, tap it off, and we're going to windshield wiper. Trying to see how the lighting, there we go. And wiggle back and forth on the outer edge since we can't swirl. Wiggle, 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 and windshield wiper. Now on this eye, this color is actually a little bit lighter than that first one, but it's deepening it up because we're layering, and they're actually very kind of, oops, throwing things. They're similar in their depth, actually. This one just has some sparkle in it. Wiggle back and forth and windshield wiper. Okay, now again, if I want that to be more of a V, I'm just kind of pulling and doing a straight line wiggle out. And we'll clean that up in a minute. Okay, so to clean that up, again, back to the first shade. Actually, I'm not going to put any more on this brush because that first shade is so intense of a color. Obviously, this is the eye where I'm trying to show you how to do a smokier, more intense look. You can absolutely do these shades in a more subtle way and wear them every day. I do it all the time. I love these shades. But you can see with that first brush, again, I didn't add any shadow to it. I'm doing the same thing as I did over here. I'm just going around the edges, softening up so that we're not seeing harsh lines now of where the shadow ends and where my next shadow begins or my skin color begins. So it's looking much more blended. But look how much more dramatic that is. And that's because I applied more product and I used deeper color products, right? Okay, so for the lower lash line, again, we're back to brush number 2 and shadow number 2. Tap it off, and I'm going to pull that down about halfway over and connect it at the edges. And again, I'm going to blend with brush number 1. I think that looks pretty. Now, again, this is a dramatic look that you might want to wear out to eat or out on the town or something. Because, you know, don't you go out on the town? Do I sound like a woman from like 1950 when I say that? I love that. Okay, all right, so that was 2 steps. Who's ready for the 3rd step? The 3rd step is, you'll notice that we have not done anything in this inner third of the eye or on the eyelid at this point. So that's what the 3rd step's going to be. And for that, you're going to use a small and very flat. Actually, small isn't so as important as flat. All right, so let's compare our brushes at this point. And I keep talking about the brushes because they are absolutely key, especially if you want to be able to take this concept and repeat it, right, for various colors and intensities. The brushes are what let you do that same concept over and over again and have it work every time. So brush number 1, brush number 2, brush number 3. This one is flat. The other 2 were fluffy and more rounded. Okay. All right, so here on step number 3 is where we can add some lightness, or I tend to do some shimmer. Now, in both of these eye looks that I've done today, I happen to have done a shimmery shade as shadow number 2. So you may not want to do all shimmer. So why don't I do a little bit of both? Okay. No, I take that back. I don't want to do a little bit of both. I want to do shimmers on both because that's how I am. That's how I roll. You don't have to do this. You could absolutely at this point just take a matte. Like on this eye, for example, you could do a matte, no shimmer, kind of bone colored, cream colored, and just put that in that area. It will be really, really pretty. You're just, at this point, we're just looking to really brighten up that lid space and into the inner corner, because that's just a very flattering look on most of our eyes, is to have something light and bright in through here, gradient out to darker. It gives you a little bit of that cat eye effect, and it will kind of lift the look of your eye on your face. So that's why we're doing something light on the lid. Again, you don't have to do this. This is just what I tend to do every day. So for this, on both of my eyes, I'm going to use this palette, which again, I'll link this below. How pretty is this palette? It has 12 mattes and 12 metallics. I use it all the time, and it's very affordable. So the technique that I'm going to use to get the most intensity out of this lid shade is with this brush number 3. I'm going to use for my left eye, I think I'm going to do this, which is kind of a champagne colored metallic. And I'm going to put that on my brush pretty generously, tap it a little bit, and then I'm going to spray it with some setting spray. And setting spray is going to make anything that's glittery or metallic or shiny more of that, more intense. And with that, now wet shadow on this brush number 3, I'm going in the part that we haven't touched, basically, and that is from my lash line up to my crease, and then over about 2/3 of the way, because remember when we did the circles or the V's, we were out here in like the last third of the lid. So now we're doing this 2/3 and then up to the crease with this shimmer. I think that's so pretty. And so now, that's really it for the shadow. I'm trying to give you a really close-up look. All right. Now, for the right side, we could do the same exact thing, right? So brush number 3, or you can use your finger. And I'm going to use my finger this time just to show you how that works. It's a little less intense, typically, than the brush with the setting spray method. But it's going to be similar, and if you don't want to have to use setting spray, or you just don't have any setting spray, just use your finger. It'll also intensify that metallic. So for the right side, since I'm doing pinks and purples, I'm going to use this pink shimmery shade. I'm going to put that on my ring finger. Isn't that pretty? Okay, now I'm going to just do the same thing, but with my finger. Now, obviously, using your finger is less precise than using a brush, but it works. And I'm tapping. I'm not really wiping, I'm tapping. In fact, I was mostly tapping with brush number 3 also. It was more of a tapping motion than a wiping. Tap, tap, tap. In the same exact placement as I did on the other eye. All right, now those metallics always give me a little bit of fallout. That's just kind of how they're made. They're softer and more crumbly. But we'll just whisk that away. And I'm really liking how that's looking. How about you? Okay, so I'm gonna say that's it for the actual eyeshadow. 1, 2, 3 brushes, 1, 2, 3 shadows. But critical to your eyeshadow look is finishing it off with an inner corner highlight, which was, if you've ever watched a makeup video on YouTube, every single person in the world talks about inner corner highlight, and it is important. It really transforms your eye look. So I hope, I'm going to do this on one eye, and I hope it will demonstrate for you the impact. When I say inner corner highlight, I mean placing right here, where we all naturally, because we're human beings, have some darkness. We're going to place some highlight right there, and you could literally use a face highlighter product, or you can use just a very light, very shimmery and reflective eyeshadow. So this is the size of an eyeshadow, but it's actually a highlight. It's just a trial size that I have, and I'm using a tiny brush. See how tiny, tiny, tiny. And I'm going to put that right here. And I'm actually placing it on the lower lash line. And right here on the top. And you can see, sorry, that light keeps shifting, into my actual kind of almost side of your nose, right? That tear duct area, above and below. Now, if you look at those two eyes, do you see, and actually, before we do our full comparison, I also like to put a little bit of that right under the arch of my brow bone. Adding light and shimmer and reflective qualities here and here, it's going to emphasize that shape that we're creating, which is from here to here. It's going to give you lightness in this inner area, which we want to look big and bright, and it's going to draw the eye of someone who's looking at you to your brow bone, which is going to kind of give you this like lift in your eye, if I'm explaining that well. But now if you look at those two eyes, do you see that this eye just looks a little bit more bright and lifted, and it just looks more finished also. It just is a very kind of professional look to your eye. So I'm going to do the same thing on the right really quickly, and then I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to do my eyeliner and mascara, and I'll come back and I'm going to show you the finished look for both of these eyes. Okay, here I am back with the finished look. I've added eyeliner and mascara so that you can get this look at what they look like when they're completely finished. Now, I think these eyes look so pretty, but they don't go together at all. So I don't know what I'm going to do for the rest of my day, but I'll just have to figure that out. But hopefully you've been able to see how to create two different looks, completely different looks. One more subtle, one more dramatic. These could be all matte looks. These could be a combo of matte and shimmer. They could be any color combo, right? So we could have done a mix of blues. We could have done a mix of just taupey, very natural shades with creams. We could have done something super, super smoky by adding like some black shadow in here. But they all can be done with 3 brushes and 3 shadows. And also let me point out that I really did the same motion, right, with brushes 1 and 2, was windshield wiper and either wiggle or circles on the outer corner. The steps that you could cut out by not using 3 steps but 2, you could do just 2 shadows, where instead of doing a shimmer on this lid and this inner portion, you just leave that open. And you can do 2 brushes like I did on the right eye, right? So instead of a 3rd brush, I used my finger. So that's how you could even make it 2 and 2. But I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope that it's made it easy for you to understand how you can get one simple concept and apply it to lots of different eyeshadow looks. I sure have had fun doing it. Like I said, I'll list all of the products that I used in the description box down below. Let me know if you like this. Let me know if you try it and how it turns out for you. And of course, let me know if you have any questions. I would love to answer them. Thanks for watching.